Let's bring things back down to earth now, to the grind, to the determination, to the inspiring example that Jack Fultz has been to so many people and a lot of people here in the audience. Jack's humble and inauspicious beginning came as a walk-on in his first college running experience. He served 4 years in the U.S. Coast Guard, set a school record at Georgetown in the 6-mile run, and in 1976, with temperatures hovering around 100 degrees, I'm sweating just saying that. I really hope it's not that hot in a couple weeks. And spectators spraying runners with hoses all along the course, Jack crossed the finish line of the Boston Marathon in first place. During his running career, Jack qualified for 3 consecutive Olympic trials and was inducted into Georgetown University's Hall of Fame in 1996. He's been invited to run with Bill Clinton, taught sports psychology for 27 years at Tufts University, and has been a coach and training advisor to the Dana-Farber Marathon Challenge team for 34 years. Jack credits his success largely as a matter of just keep showing up. So please join me in showing up for our next speaker, Jack Fultz.
Can you hear me? Is this working? Oh, good. Wonderful to be here, Garrett. Thank you very much for that flattering introduction and for inviting me to be a part of this very illustrious panel. Running is kind of part science, part art. So, depending on which one you want. But no black holes that I know of, although I've been in a few situations in races where it kind of felt that way. I guess it felt, I'm not really sure how it feels like that. But, and thank all of you also for being here to support Garrett in his marathon fundraising. Marathon, both literally and figuratively. It's a lot of money he has to raise, and it's for a marathon. So it really all kind of goes hand in hand. And the fact that you're all here kind of proves that the Boston Red Sox are not the only game in town. So anyway, when Garrett also told me about the title of tonight's presentations, Grit and Gumption, right? Grit and Gumption, guttural. It reminded me of my favorite poem, which I used a lot to motivate myself, almost as a mantra through my own running career. I still use it from time to time. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except the will, which says to them, hold on. Some of you may recognize that as being part of Rudyard Kipling's poem, If, which he wrote to and for his son. And that really reeks with the notion of grit and gumption. I think he was really trying to prepare his son for the world at large and getting through it, and the grit and gumption necessary, really, to pursue and achieve whatever endeavors he and all of us really may want to pursue for ourselves. So and another thing that came to mind when I heard grit and gumption was another quote that we've all heard, that winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. Well, remember who said that? Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi, the renowned, iconic coach of the NFL. He coached the Green Bay Packers to the victory in the first 2 Super Bowls way back in the 60s. And the trophy for the winning team in the Super Bowl every year this year, or now, is the Lombardi Trophy, named for him. So a real icon there. But it's interesting, winning isn't everything, it's the only thing. It really does sum up that notion of grit and gumption, does it not? But he was ostracized for that because of the message it really kind of sent. A little bit in the way the Nike ad a number of years ago sent. They said, you don't win silver, you lose gold. Well, kind of a nice catchphrase. Someone's up that notion of a little grit, a little gumption, but they took that ad down pretty quickly. And Vince Lombardi came back and corrected or clarified what he meant. He said, what I meant was winning isn't everything, but the will to win is. And interestingly, they may sound the same or very similar, but the will to win, interestingly, has very little, if anything, to actually do with the outcome of an event, of a competition in particular. In this case, with Lombardi being a football coach. But you can apply that to just about any endeavor, science, arts, athletics, and just about anything in between that we may choose. So by clarifying that, I think that new phrase, if you will, that it's not the winning isn't everything, but the will to win is, that can be applied to just about anything and everything that we may choose to pursue. And how many of you remember Meb Keflezighi? Remember that name? The runners do, of course. Meb Keflezighi was the last American to win the Boston Marathon, last American male. He won it in 2014, so it was 9 years ago. Des Linden won it in 2018 in the big hurricane storm. But when Meb won here, it had been 31 years since a previous American male had won the Boston Marathon. So things getting pretty spread out on this. But Meb was interesting. He was not favored to win that race. He was 38 years old by then. He had won the silver medal in the 2004 Athens Olympics marathon. He won the New York City Marathon in 2009. So he was a known quantity and was very, very good. But everybody thought he was pretty much on the twilight of his career. He's 38 years old, as I said. He towed the line. He came back the year after the marathon bombings in 2013. And he said, I dug as deep as I possibly could. Grit and gumption. Once again, taking on guys that were so much faster than him. There were a handful of runners in that race had PRs, personal records, their fastest career times, up to 5 minutes faster than his very best time in his entire career. So let's say Vegas wasn't putting good odds on Meb winning this race. But when he did, and it was a very exciting race, incredible. But anyway, so he put, like Lombardi, if you will, came up with a phrase that is very similar to my notion on this idea of victory, if you will, because we tend in our society conflate victory with success, and they're really not the same thing. And the way Meb put it was, you don't have to be first to win. And there's a lot more profundity behind that when you think about it, that you don't. Or in our society, our capitalistic, competitive society, it's kind of a one-way street. And as I said, we conflate victory with success. And I think a lot of important stuff gets lost in that notion. My take on that, and the phrase I use, and if I ever get my book written, it'll probably be the title, that winning is an attitude. We all think of winning as being an outcome. And it is an outcome. And the outcomes are not unimportant. The results are not unimportant. But the path to the victories, to the successes, if you will, is not necessarily a direct line of simply vanquishing our foes, beating the other team, the other individuals, where we make them the enemy. Then they need to be defeated. So this was kind of a theme through my entire athletic career. But when I came up to run Boston in '76 is where it really rung home for me. I came up to Boston that year. I'd already run Boston 3 times when I was in the Coast Guard. That's when I get into marathoning. I got out of the service, and I went back to finish up my undergraduate work, and I was at Georgetown because I was already down in D.C., met all the right people. Everything really worked out wonderfully. But then finally, in '76, I was what a Boston Globe sports columnist called a mustachioed, superannuated senior at Georgetown University. I still had the mustache, superannuated because I was 27 years old now as a senior. And so it was an interesting dynamic. But anyway, so I came up to Boston, and having been a competitive athlete, having run Boston a number of times, 3 times, I ran the Olympic trials in '72. I was getting my feet wet, and things were going well. But as a competitive athlete, again, that kind of narrow, single-minded focus of this idea. You get into a race, the idea, what's your goal? Well, to win, of course. But by what means and how are you defining winning? What is really maybe success? So when I came to Boston that year, my objective was not only to be competitive in the field, but more so, it was an Olympic year. '76 would be an Olympic year, and I was in school now so I couldn't run on the roads. I couldn't run a marathon to get a qualifier for the U.S. Olympic trials. You have to qualify for the trials to make the U.S. Olympic team in running, and then in the trials, you finish in the top 3. But without a time to get into the qualifying race, you can't even take a shot at it. As a senior down there, I was going to be graduating. I was getting out of school. Running wasn't then what it is now. There wasn't money in the sport or whatnot. And even at Boston, there wasn't a whole lot to offer. There were no water stops, no mileage markers, no nothing. You didn't know where you were vis-a-vis time or anything. So yeah, it was a kind of a comedy of errors back then too, but it was all we had. We didn't know any better that races could be like what they are today. But interestingly enough, the dynamic, so I needed to run a particular time. I needed to run under 2 hours and 20 minutes to get an A standard qualifying time. Now, I had not run that fast in my marathoning career before I went back to school and finished up running on the track, indoor and outdoor track and cross country. And so I didn't have the opportunity to run a qualifying race, but I was a much more advanced runner. Now, all that training and racing at Georgetown over the years with the shorter distances and training much faster, I was supremely confident that I was ready to get this qualifying time, and in fact, possibly make the Olympic team. I mean, it was a stretch goal. We had Frank Shorter coming back, who had won the Olympics in 1972, and he was coming back. Bill Rogers had set the American record the year before in Boston, 1975, in the first of his 4 wins. So the rest of us were thinking, we were going for crumbs, that 3rd spot. Right? And America had very competitive distance runners back then. They do now, but then we were really kind of because the running boom had really just started in the early 70s, and the rest of the world hadn't caught up. So America was really dominating the whole scene. So anyway, because my primary goal was not necessarily to win, to beat all these other guys, I was going to use that, and I wanted to place as high as I could, possibly win. I had finished 12th, my first Boston here, so I knew I could contend well into the top 3, top 5, top 10. But I needed that qualifying time. And so all of a sudden, this cognitive shift happened, and I realized everybody in this race, they're not my opponents, they're not my enemies, they're my allies, they are my friends. The faster they run, the faster I'm going to run. They're like now my teammates. In my mind, this is simply my own cognitive structure of approaching this race. And it just eliminated the whole notion of any competition anxiety that you always experience when you're getting ready for some presentation, some performance you prepared for or whatever. In athletics, it's part of the whole scene. So you get the butterflies, and to the degree that those things are used that we can use those to motivate ourselves, or the degree to which they start getting in the way and we start to sabotage ourselves with self-doubt and whatever all the other things that come along with that. But none of that was there. And as it turns out, in hindsight, I was poised to run what was going to be for me the absolute perfect race. As Garrett mentioned, well, he didn't mention the fact that to run a fast time, you need a nice cool day. He did reference that he's hoping it's not 100 degrees in 2.5 weeks. But it was. I mean, it's crazy. April, maybe this is the beginning of climate change. I don't know. It was 1976, and it's 96 degrees in April. So it was. What are the chances of that? But anyway, the A standard was 2:20. I thought I was ready. I thought I had a 4 or 5 minute cushion. And there was a B standard of 2 hours and 23 minutes. You had to pay your own way. The Olympic Committee wouldn't pay your way to the trials, but you could get there. So I'm thinking, I have a 7 or 8 minute cushion here. If the heat's not going to slow us down that much, will it? I don't know. And I figured it was going to slow everybody else down pretty much the same. So once again, I had looked at because there were no times out there, no clocks on the course, no mileage markers. You didn't know where you were vis-a-vis time, and yet I had to run a time. Having run it before, I had a good sense of what it would take. And I looked at the results from the previous years, and the top 10 on a good day, on a good weather day, usually would be under 2:20. So I said, okay, I have to run for place, but I'm going for time. So it was another unique, interesting dynamic. Well, because it was so hot, and actually, even on cool days, everybody, you guys are running the marathon on the Dana-Farber team, by the way, take heed. Once again, you've heard me say it 100 times. You hear me say it another 100 times. Don't go out too fast. 98% of the field always does, and they end up running what we call positive splits, or a slower second half. It's one of the few times where a negative is a positive. You want to run negative splits, that's a positive thing. And it's going to benefit you later on in the race. So I was speed trained. I knew what Boston could do to you even on a good day. Now it's hot, and even though a lot of the lead runners in the field were coming from hot weather climates, the guys finished 3 places. The 3 places behind me were from Mexico, Puerto Rico, and New Zealand summer, and he had set the world record in the Masters division of the marathon just the year before. So I was up against some real competition here. Nonetheless, they went out fast. I let them go. The first mile, I was maybe in the top 100. I could see the leaders. They weren't that far ahead, but there they were. By Wellesley, I moved into the top 10. And I'm thinking, top 10 is going to get me my qualifying time. I felt like I hadn't even started to warm up, despite it being hot. I'd already run probably 14 miles to the 13-mile mark, running in people's yards, running under the shower, the garden hoses they put up on the step ladders. It became known as the run for the hoses. Somebody put a sign on the lead press bus, hose the runners. And so the race, you look it up, you'll see it, it's run for the hoses. So, and of course, the run for the roses is only a week away. So maybe there's a little bit of that going on as well. Nonetheless, by Wellesley, I'd moved into the top 10. I felt like I hadn't even really started to run. And I'm like, my job's over already. All I have to do is sit here for another hour, and I'm good to go. That was only part of it, actually, because I still, as a competitive runner, wanted to see how far up I could finish in the top 10. It had always been a dream of mine for quite some time, having run marathons, to see how far I could go and possibly win the Boston Marathon. But it's a pipe dream for just about every runner until they actually get into the arena and get close and start smelling that rose. So finally, I'm running past Newton Wellesley Hospital, which is about 17-mile mark before the infamous Newton Firehouse. You turn right and then really hit the Newton Hills. And all of a sudden, there were two guys in front of me, and somebody yells, "That's second, third place right there." I'm like, whoa, okay. I'm thinking top 10 until now, all of a sudden, whoa, I'm about to move into second place in the race. This dream is starting to come alive. It's starting to come true. And lo and behold, I ran past those two guys. I had some ice cubes that somebody had handed me. Most of them were melted. Figured I'd do a little ploy. Here, you guys need a little help, right? And so a little bit of the competitive aspect was still brewing in there, but I was trying to be just, honest to the entire process. Turned the bend, looked up. There was the press bus running along with the lead runner. So all of a sudden, I'm about to take over the lead, and now I'm going to be winning the Boston Marathon. As I ran past the guy, the leader at the time, Richard Mabuza from Swaziland, he'd been leading the whole first 18 miles. The photography truck, they'd used up most of their film. They said, no one's going to catch this guy. So I accused them of having a beer party on the truck. They were actually, I was clarified, and they said, no, it was all soda. So I'll take their word for it. Nonetheless, so I'm running up on the lead runner. On the track, you always want to sneak up on somebody. When you're going to go by them, you have to kind of sneak up, put a burst of speed there, and try to discourage them when you go by. If you just kind of lollygag past somebody, they're going to jump on your back and kind of use you to pull themselves along. So in a way to dissuade him from doing that, I was ready to blast by, and the race director stuck his head out the window, the bus door, saw me coming, and he pulls out his megaphone, make way, there's another runner coming. I didn't know who he was announcing this to, other than the guy who was leading, who I didn't want to know I was coming. But nonetheless, there we were. It didn't matter. I was running the tangent, so when the road turns, you actually crisscross the road trying to run the straightest tangent line. There's a piece of science right there. So I'm on one side of the road, and the leader, Richard's, over on the other side of the road. I felt so bad. I looked over at him, and our eyes met. He looked over at me, and as a competitive athlete, you're running by somebody and you're in a race with them, and it's kind of like, boom, I got you. A little grit and gumption, right? It wasn't that at all. I was actually surprised at my reaction to that. I looked at him. I had been in that position before. I had been the passee, right? And going backwards, going out the back door, as he was at the time. And it was just a sense of empathy for him. I just felt, oh no. He led this race for 18 miles. I'm sure most of that he thought he was going to win until the wheels started to fall off. I had been there before. But nonetheless, that sense of sensitivity passed pretty quickly. And all of a sudden, now I'm leading the race, right? Because it was so hot, we were running under these hoses and stuff. I had cut my bib number down to single digits, just a 1 and a 4. 14 was my bib number, and that was also Bill Rogers' bib number the year before, ironically enough. But as we got all wet, the paper numbers curled up, and so they couldn't see. I didn't have a bib number on when I took the lead, and they didn't know who I was. And so they're asking me, the guys on the photography truck in particular, some of them taking pictures, a few of them had a little bit of film left, and I wouldn't tell them. It's very rare when you know something that everybody else wants to know and doesn't know, and and there's a real sense of power, I'll tell you. But nonetheless, so I'm running, and they keep guessing and guessing, and I started thinking, my number was 14. They didn't have to go too far down the list to see a Georgetown affiliation because I had Georgetown on my shirt. Garrett had showed that picture. And surely, finally, one of the guys recognized. First they thought I was my Georgetown roommate's name. He was a little marathoner from Long Island. So, oh, you're Justin Gubbins. We know you from Georgetown. Well, little did they know that he was my roommate at Georgetown. So I got a little chuckle out of that. But nonetheless, they finally figured out who I was. Now I'm in the race, and I'm running along, and I still have, it was about the 18-mile mark when I took the lead, and now all this fandangle happened over the next couple of miles. And so I'm running along, the spectators are all yelling, there's nobody coming, nobody near you. I'm feeling great, I'm just running along, and all of a sudden my calves start to cramp. I felt perfect otherwise, and now I'm starting to stumble a little bit. And I had a brief moment of panic, thinking, oh no, I had the golden ring in my hand, and now somebody's gonna come by and take it from me. But the next thought was, wait, remember why you're here. You're here to get your qualifying time and place as high as you can. If somebody is running a better race, if they come by and take your lead and win the race, and you still get your qualifying time, you've accomplished the goal. You're going to run the Olympic trials in 6 weeks and take a shot at making the Olympic team, and you'll come back next year and take another shot at trying to win this race. And that alone kind of diffused my panic. I relaxed. I even let myself slow down a little bit so my calves would relax. I ran down the next big hill into Cleveland Circle with 4 miles to go. And lo and behold, by virtue of doing that, relaxing myself and slowing down a little bit, my calves relaxed. And by the time I was running down Beacon Street, I was fine. I was back in my groove. I was in the zone, running along. Again, spectators tell me nobody's coming. So I'm just running along, right? I didn't know what my time was, whatever. But by the time I got to the finish line, I just stopped running because the race was over. I felt like I could have just kept on going. So it was one of those magical, perfect days. It was just absolutely incredible that it happened. But putting that into perspective, so I won. I came back the next year to defend. I ran almost the same time. It was another hot year. It wasn't quite as hot, but I only finished 9th. And that same Globe reporter I mentioned to you called me a superannuated, mustachioed senior from Georgetown University. He said, Jack, what happened? You ran the same time. You only got 9th this year. He said, what happened? I said, this year 8 guys ran faster than me. If they hadn't been here, I would have won again. So, which is true. But anyway, so I'm running out of time, and we have some other speakers coming. But coming back to that Kipling poem, which I said really inspires and motivates me, has for many, many years, and to this day, I'll see if I can share it with you. Remember it. If you can keep your head when those about you are losing yours and blaming it on you, if you can trust yourself when all men doubt you and make allowance for their doubting too, if you can wait and not be tired by waiting, or be lied about, don't deal in lies, or be hated, don't give way to hating, and yet not look too good, nor talk too wise. If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those two impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or see the things you gave your life to broken, then stoop and build them up with worn-out tools. If you can make one heap of all your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss, and lose, then start again at your beginnings, and never breathe a word about your loss. If you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except that will which says to them, hold on. If you can talk to crowds and keep your virtue, or walk with kings, not lose the common touch, if neither foe nor loving friend can hurt you, if all men count with you, but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it, and which is more, you'll be a man, my son. That was Kipling to his son. But anyway, so thank you very much for having me this evening. Garrett, thanks for having me. And Marathoners, take with you the grit and gumption necessary to get you from Hopkinton to Boston. Thank you.